Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Werner and Joey Wagner. And in Joey, it was a little sleepy Sunday. I was kind of sitting by my computer, just waiting. And I'm thinking, hey, are we going to have to write anything tonight? By the end of the day, I think we had about 10 news stories, 3 commitments on Sunday night, 1 more on Monday. Illinois football is really getting this class of 2023 going, Joey. With 4 commitments so far over the weekend, 6 other uncommitted guys visited, 3 commits visited as well. So let's talk about it all. We'll break down the commits. We'll talk about who's out there. We'll talk about the top needs in the class and which each of these guys brings and what it says about the Illini staff. That got a little hectic there, Joey. What'd you think?
And it really picked up at the end, and it picked up, and I know we'll get into it. And just kind of like I categorize how it picked up in 2 different ways. Like, there were the ones that we thought made all the sense in the world to pop on Sunday night, and Cal Swanson and Pat Farrell. And then there were the 2 that you probably didn't expect as much, Rico Jackson and Jamarian Harkless. Like that really, Harkless in particular kind of took me by surprise. I'll go a little behind the curtain, Jeremy. I know we were talking, you, myself, and Ryan Easterling over the weekend, trying to social media sleuth our way through how it was going as best we can. And Harkless had actually deleted his whole Instagram save for 2 Illinois pictures. And in 2022, you're like, does this mean something or nothing? Turns out it meant something, and it meant a really, really big splash for Illinois football.
Yeah, I think this weekend has had a little bit of everything that you want, right? You kind of get the layups. And for a long time, I've had a crystal ball pick in for Pat Farrell, and that gets done, right? He commits on Sunday night. It felt like this was going to happen all along. So maybe it's not as exciting to people, but I think it's a really good get. We'll talk about what he brings coming up. Cal Swanson, Illinois, the only FBS offer. They get him for official visit. That's a layup, right? You close on that guy when he gets to campus. But yeah, I thought Rico Jackson, if we had an offensive lineman we thought going into the weekend would be most likely to pop, it'd probably be East St. Louis, Brandon Henderson. But Illinois did a really good job with Rico Jackson, George McDonald, who recruits Florida for Illinois, along with Aaron Henry. But George McDonald led on this one. Bart Miller has had a heck of a 3 weeks, man. 3 offensive linemen, all legit Power 5 prospects. I broke it down about what it means about how the Illinois O-line compares to what they've gotten recently. And this is a really good O-line class when you go by Power 5 offers. But then I thought Rico was a little bit of a surprise. Like, oh, okay, well, maybe they'll go over the 2.5 number that our boards were talking about for commits quickly after the weekend. But to be honest with you, had a text out, got a text back that Harkless was committed just about a couple hours before he actually did it, Joey. And wow, that is a headline. That is the headliner that I think gets people excited. And then you add the other pieces to it. And this is what momentum looks like, right? I think for a long time, this class was kind of like, all right, Caden Fagan, headliner, Antoine Hayden. Okay, here goes the roll. And then just kind of slowed down for a while. Then TJ McMillan, I thought was a really big addition for Illinois. So to get him on board, I thought was kind of a big one, especially being in state. I thought getting a guy like that was really, really important. And then, of course, Zachary Amlin, I think is a nice addition from New Jersey, adding him to the offensive line. But it's like, this is the time to really get momentum. And landing a kid with offers from Georgia, LSU, Michigan, but you got in early. I thought this weekend kind of, I don't know if it exceeded expectation, but I would say, yeah, it exceeded expectations. I would have thought Cal Swanson and Pat Farrell definitely will be on board. And then 1 more. Who is it? Is it Brandon Henderson? Turns out being Rico Jackson. I think that would have been a solid weekend. You add Harkless to it. I think that's a really, really great start to the first official visit weekend.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is it exceeded immediate expectations. Because I think if we look at the 10 uncommitted guys, probably think that there's 1 or 2 more out there who could pop at some point down the line. Some of these guys take time. They go on other visits. They do all, it's not like the Illinois staff doesn't know that these kids are going on other, that's just part of this. But I think immediately to get a Harkless and a Rico Jackson, dude, that's beyond what we thought. I mean, especially Sunday night when they did it, or Sunday. Rico Jackson apparently doesn't sleep in on Sundays, which is
It's on
Great
my
father
schedule.
of two,
Yeah,
Werner.
yeah, it's on my schedule before 8 a.m. Love it.
But I think you see a little bit of one, the coaching staff with Harkless in particular did just a remarkable job going down into Frederick Douglass High School. Andy Boo has connections that he is very well thought of in that school, and their persistence. Then you bring in Terrence Jamison and Brett Bielema. I think you see that the staff really does know how to get this done, and there's still a little momentum. I mean, I know 5-7. Brett Bielema said a million times he didn't come to Illinois to go 5-7, but I think there was enough that you saw where you could maybe start to say, "See, we're here, and you could get us here." Like there was enough last year to show that, and we'll see if it turns into more. But immediately, it turned into a pretty good haul.
Yeah, I think we're starting to learn they're pretty good at this official visit weekend. They're pretty good as a staff of this whole recruiting process. Like I had at one point in my head, Joey, oh, this is what it's like to cover a PJ Fleck program, right? Like they close, like they get these weekends, they nail it out of the park. No matter what you think of PJ Fleck, he's a good recruiter, right? Or you see all these other programs are able to have these weekends where they get 5 or 6 commitments, and it's like, man, why does it look so hard at Illinois some other times? But I think we've learned the past couple of years that they're pretty well-oiled machine. Now they got some battles, but to already have 4 of the 10 uncommitted guys on board last year, to get 4 of the 7 who were uncommitted at the time in the first weekend, I think that's a pretty good hit rate. And if you can get over 500 here, if you can land one of Malik Elzy, Jair Hill, Deacon Tanielli, we'll talk about some of these guys, Frederick Moore, Brandon Henderson, Sabor Kareem, like you had 2 more of those guys. I think that's one heck of a recruiting weekend, and one of the better recruiting weekends Illinois has had in a while.
Yeah, that's a good way to springboard into in 2 weeks the Florida contingent who's going to visit, and then you'll still have some room to work in the fall a little bit. But this first half, this month of June as a whole is where you want to set your foundation. And COVID changed that, right? Because remember, kids couldn't visit anywhere. And then like June 1st happened, and there were like doors opening at midnight. It's like Black Friday, man. Like people were just coming all over the place. So I think you've seen June really turn into that foundational piece. And you see programs like Illinois and really last year where you want to get guys to carry a little momentum into that June weekend. But that's really such a big part. And yeah, man, if you can close out 2 more, 2 more would feel really good. You'd be batting 600. That's good, man. Like recruiting is hard. Like recruiting hit rates they're not like baseball levels where if you're 250, you're good. That's probably a little low, but you want to be in that like 400, 450, 500 range. And that means you're evaluating who you should have on campus. You're probably taking a couple swings for the fences, but you recognize who's close, who fits, why a visit could get it done. And then you hope with somebody, we've seen them take kind of home run shots before, especially last year with kids. You hope maybe you can sway one, but batting 600, if they can do that coming out of this weekend's good, and they're off to a good start doing that.
Yeah, and I think we got to remember, Brett Bielema told you, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, 12 to 15 in this class. I've told you, I think it's going to be on the higher end of that range. I think 15 makes a lot of sense, especially taking a quarterback here. I think they'll probably hit that 15 number. So if that's right, you're halfway done to a class. I think that's really important. As you said, Joey, add a couple more before June gets out. Maybe, one of the guys who visited here recently, like a Sean Miller, waits until July. Jared Beatty waited until early July. But you head into the season with most of your class in place, and then you can kind of find, evaluate, take a breath and kind of replenish yourself, and then kind of see what else is out there. If somebody else is holding on or somebody else emerges as a senior, like a Jimmy Rolder did last year, right? Or a Matthew Bailey did last year during the season, TJ Griffin. I think that's where Illinois can kind of reset and then go into the season and take some more time. Let's break down some of the additions Illinois made. And let's start with the headliner. And some people out there might be saying, hey, 3-star kid, that shouldn't be a headliner in a class. Put on Jamarian Harkless's film. Jamarian Harkless, excuse me. Put on his film and tell me that kid's not a 4-star quality guy. I have a beef with our rankings, all right? Whether it's Rivals, 24/7, whoever does it. Why do we have 150 or so 4 stars in basketball and then only 350 in football. There's 6.5 times more football players. So why not take that out? I think there should be like 750 plus 4-star guys. Harkless is one of those guys, in my opinion. So that's why I think he's an absolute headliner. But we know the story, Joey. But for those that don't, Illinois offered in April. They were just the second Power 5 offer. West Virginia had offered as well. Kid out of Kentucky, 6'4", 290 pounds, just a big kid, really strong, violent hands. And Illinois offers the next week: Georgia, LSU, Michigan. Home state offers from Kentucky, Louisville, Purdue, Ole Miss, Cincinnati. So 3 of the 4 college football playoff teams from last year had offered this kid, and Illinois still finds a way to win this recruitment. That's a heck of a job. And as you said, Andy Boo kept in contact with him more than any coach. He gets on campus for the official. Illinois wastes a little time. They close this one. I don't know how hard Georgia, LSU, some of those other programs, Michigan, were pushing for him, but Illinois didn't give them another chance. And still, even if it's Louisville, Kentucky, some of these other programs, Joey, to close that quickly, I think it's just a heck of a job and fills a huge need that Illinois had been struggling to fill in this class.
Yeah, we've talked at length about the defensive line recruiting in the last 2 cycles. And there's been some misses, but you come in with a pretty big hit, and you bring him out of Kentucky, where he was scheduled for an OV, an official visit to Louisville. It's not like those schools, especially in state, were kind of like, maybe not. I mean, official visit means things are cooking. Like there's enough interest for you to use one of your 5 and for a school to use one of the slots. So they wanted him. And yeah, we don't know how hard some of those big powerhouses were pushing, but his coach told me there's not a lot of kids like him at 6'2", 300 pounds who move as well as he does with the hip mobility, flexibility. Like we've talked about this a lot, Jeremy. There's not a lot of like Power 5, true, no doubt Power 5 defensive linemen sitting out there. It's
especially Joey, especially nose guards. Like it is hard to find guys who are that big who move that quickly. Like D-line and quarterbacks are the most hotly contested battles just because there's not enough of them. Like the supply does not meet the demand.
In NIL world, those are guys who ultimately cash out pretty well because there's a market for them, Jeremy. And for Brett Bielema to go in and Andy Boo and Terrence Jamison to get him, and nose tackle in particular, Jeremy, has been a spot that like we still don't know what Illinois is walking into with this year in terms of production. We know the names. We don't know what it's going to really have much of a – we have a guess, I guess, but it's hard to really project what that looks like. He's going to have a chance early. I don't know how big that chance is going to be, what it's going to look like, but at his frame and his quickness and his talent, he's going to have a chance early at a position that there's a lot of opportunities sitting out there. We talk a lot about basketball and guards, right, this year, where there's opportunity for freshman guards to come in. There's opportunities for him to come in here and kind of make a splash a little bit. So that it can't be understated how big that win was. And I agree with you. Don't get caught up in the star. Don't get caught up in the, where he ranks. I know that's kind of our job to do that, but look at the offers. I think that's what you really look at, the offers, follow the visits, and you can see how well he's thought of. And then the rest of it will probably change and catch up as time goes on. And
I think you can be a novice football person and just turn on the film and see he's different. Like the film pops. Lovie Smith and his staff did a pretty dang good job of recruiting defensive linemen, whether it was Bobby Roundtree at the time, Vertus Brown and Kendrick Green were defensive linemen, right? Like those guys turned into pretty good players. Owen Carney, Isaiah Gay was a great evaluation, I think, still to this day. Keith Randolph, Johnny Newton, some really good guys. Yeah, Calvin Avery. Like this guy, to me, Keith Randolph's film popped, even though he was not very experienced football player. Johnny Newton, to me, I turned on his film. I said, that guy's going to be an NFL prospect someday. Like there's just NFL burst size guys who move that well at that size. There's just not many of them. And I think Harkless is one of those guys. And I think he's a nose guard. He can play some 3 technique, but to put him at nose guard to eventually replace Calvin Avery, Vertus Brown, T-Raw Edwards will be in that mix, Rashawn Wilkins will be in that mix. But I wouldn't be surprised if Harkless is a true freshman that's in the rotation. I think he's that caliber of player, similar to Johnny Newton, who made similar kind of impact. So that's a guy that I would know right away. And I think he's going to be one of the headliners when they sign. I think he's going to be one of the biggest gets. And after losing on Roderick Pearson, Tyler Gant, and Dante Barone, and maybe not having a lot of momentum right now with Jamel Howard, who's leaning towards probably Wisconsin at this point, I just think there's a massive get. And to get him in the middle of your defense and then find some complementary pieces in the rest of this class, whether it's Howard, whether it's Mason Murrigan, a defensive lineman from Michigan, who's taking an official visit, whether it's Ian Jeffries out of Mississippi, who just got offered, that's more of a 3-tech. I just think you can kind of fit it all around Harkless. I think he's going to be a linchpin of this defense in the future.
Yeah, I know Brett can't tell us until December, but I would love to know that room when he told them. Like, do you think they had a vibe like, hey, this is going really well? I'm sure they did. I mean, they seem to be have a pretty good pulse on things. I just wonder what it was like when he sat in, I'm guessing, in Brett's office and told them. It had to be, you just have to know, for all the reasons you said, that was a position that you had to address and you still have to address. And then you get I thought he was the biggest out-of-state prospect to visit this whole month scheduled, and you get him and you don't have to freaking wait for it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're honest, like, this might have been the top guy left on their board. Realistic guy. Like, listen, Jair Hill and Malik Elsie could be phenomenal players, but like, this guy is really important. And I think Terrence Jameson has to be pumped, because the concerns heading into this week were legitimate, but this is why June is so important. And you don't make too big of a, evaluation of or opinion of what this class is or is going to be, because things can change, man. They can change quickly in June. And I don't think there was a bigger commitment out of this week than Jamarian Harkless. Let's go to the next one that's going to get the most headlines. That's Cal Swanson, a quarterback out of Ardmore. Unlike Harkless, right? It's kind of a very different thing, very important position, but way under recruited. The offer list, no other FBS offers. Tarleton State, right, was the other recent offer for Cal Swanson. But Barry Lunny saw something in Cal Swanson, and you put on the film, and you can see like why you'd be intrigued by this guy, because he's an unbelievable athlete. He's got great speed. He's got elite escapability in the pocket. I think he's got arm talent. I wouldn't say his arm is the strongest, but I think it's good enough. And he runs an offense where there's a lot of quick hitters that I think could fit an up-tempo offense. I think Barry Lunny is going to move the quarterback around a lot more. But I think the way Illinois showed urgency here, Joey, suggests that they thought this kid could get more, that they thought they found something special here. Whether he will be, I think we'll find out 3-4 years from now, but they seem to have an urgency to close on Cal Swanson, even if other programs hadn't seen it yet. That's what I find most intriguing.
Yeah, they made it happen really quickly. And he's a kid that, look, we don't know what it's going to look like as a quarterback, but that speed will play somewhere if things maybe don't work out as well as he hopes quarterback. Well, I'm not trying to project that to be the case, but that's legit speed that plays on the football field. And again, with quarterbacks, I know we've talked about this a lot. You're not expecting most quarterbacks, and there's like what, Jeremy, 5% of quarterbacks out of high school that you think could start as true freshmen. Like, honestly, so you're not expecting him to come in here 1 year from now in fall camp and be like, hey, look out, this is my job. Like, that's probably not reality. I'm sure he'll come in and he'll compete, but he's somebody you want to have as many, I've said it before, as many bites at the apple at the quarterback position as you can possibly have, because if you hit one, you're alleviated for like 2 or 3 years. Like, if you can get the one, you can breathe a little bit better. And we don't know. I mean, we don't know what it's going to be for him. The skills, when you look at the stats, Jeremy, you look at the tape, and it is hard to think that really no other FBS offers anywhere. Like, he visited Tulsa, and you're like, offer. Like, it would make sense to offer if you're.
I don't know Tulsa's recruiting board or who else they're recruiting at quarterback. But yeah, I think what you're saying, Joey, is like, hey, I can understand if other Power 5 offers maybe didn't offer here. There's some jump throws that make you feel uncomfortable. He's a little thin, right? Like the arm isn't the strongest. But you're thinking, how did all the FBS schools, how did, all those American schools, how did, how Mountain West schools, like how did he kind of go under the radar despite having the numbers that he did? And Illinois didn't want to take the chance, obviously, that he could blow up.
Yeah, it's just kind of hard to wrap your head around a little bit. Is not one, and again, that's not to say the kid's a bad quarterback. The film doesn't say he shouldn't have any FBS offers. The stats are frankly pretty. I mean, if you were just passing by the stats, you'd stop. Like they're good stats. I mean, 70 some odd % completion rate, right? And with the speed, it's kind of hard to grasp. But yeah, it looks like Illinois, Barry Lunney saw something that they want. Barry went in there and closed this thing down pretty quick. I mean, he seems like he also pushed the right buttons in that recruitment, taking him fishing and doing the whole 9 yards. I mean, he got it done fast, and we'll see what it turns into.
It's an Arkansas boy with an Oklahoma boy. It's kind of right. They're very similar backgrounds there. One kid from Ardmore, the other from Fort Smith, Arkansas. So yeah, I think there was definite bond there of coming from the same background. But I think it's interesting because he's so different than the quarterbacks that they have coming in, right? Like Kirkland Michaud is the other guy we know that Barry Lunney's bringing in, a preferred walk-on that I would project has a better chance to start earlier than Cal Swanson, right? But he's 6'5", 230 pounds, strong arm quarterback who played baseball the last couple of years, right? So put up great numbers in Texas high school football, won a state championship at a very high level there at Westlake, which is a loaded school out of Austin. So you add him, and you're looking at the future of the quarterback position. Samari Collier, accuracy remains the question, but there's talent there, and the staff did say some nice things about him this spring, but I still think he's going to be behind Ryan Johnson. Donovan Leary comes in. I think he's obviously a very intriguing skill set. He's a decent athlete, good arm, and given his brother's success at NC State, now being an NFL draft prospect, he's got some good bloodlines there. But now you had someone completely different. Like Donovan Leary is a pocket passer with a little bit of mobility. Samari Collier, pretty dang good athlete, strong arm, but a little raw. Kirkland Michaud, kind of this Drew Bledsoe-like kind of style of quarterback, pocket passer, strong arm. And then you had this guy who I would say is a better runner at this point, or a more proven runner than he is as a passer. So it's just an interesting quarterback room, Joey. And I think we're talking more about what's it look like 2023 and beyond, because we know DeVito and Sikowski are the guys now. Sikowski's got 2 years of eligibility left, so he could still be in the mix in 23. I still think a transfer is likely in the offseason, but it will be interesting. Like, what do you think of the stamp so far with just two guys, one walk-on, that Lunney's trying to put on the quarterback room?
You're right. And I know our Ryan Easterling wrote this in his film review. It's kind of hard to find a direct line between them all. And does that tell you? I don't know what that tells you. I think Barry Lunney can make his offense go with a couple different pieces. I think he might have different levers he can pull depending on who's back there. And obviously a Cal Swanson you probably pull the run a little bit more lever there. But I don't know. It's hard. Like we talked about this with, good Lord, Jeremy, we've talked about this 100 times, but okay, next recruiting cycle, we're really going to see what they're after in the quarterback position, because the offensive coordinators change. I don't want to kick it down the road anymore, but like there is some truth to that you'll see, I would think, more of a Lunney stamp. I think you maybe can start to piece some things together, but when you start seeing some of the 2024 offers going, maybe you'll understand it more. And maybe that's not fun to hear, but you can't cycle through coordinators like that and have it any other way.
From the guys they've offered, most of them are pocket passers with a little bit of mobility. That's why the Cal Swanson one was so interesting to me, because I think it's going to be more guys that kind of look like Donovan Leary, 6'3", pocket passers. Hank Brown they offered, Brock Glenn they offered. So I think it's going to look more like this. So this one kind of throws me for a loop a little bit. But he is an intriguing, exciting talent. I don't know if he's going to be the guy eventually, but yeah, I don't know if there's going to have one mold. Like I think Garrick McGee and Tony Peterson kind of had a mold Rod Smith, I think, was more dual threat. And then he went and got Brandon Peters. So sometimes these offense coordinators, I don't know if they have like an exact mold. They just kind of, look for certain traits, and sometimes they want different traits. So you have different guys. So I think having a guy who can be mobile, if Barry eventually wants to go that route, might be a decent option to have along with Michaud and Leary, guys who are more pocket passers, that if he wants to go to some other, those guys aren't working out, maybe they need a quarterback who can run for his life a little bit more, you turn to him.
Yeah. What is the quote, Jeremy? Sometimes the best ability is availability. And Cal Swanson was available with Rod Smith. Brandon Peters was available. And you're compensated well enough. You've been around the game long enough. You can probably make it work with guys who maybe aren't, what you would exactly in your mind draw up for, your ideal. If you got to create a 5-star quarterback in the lab, you can make it work if you have to go outside those parameters a little bit. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Swanson is vastly different, I would say, than some of the other offers. We'll see what it all looks like. And maybe it's the case again where you look at him and you say, hey, you run like that. We kind of a tall kid. We could figure this out, wherever you work best.
All right, let's talk about the two other commitments over the weekend. Rico Jackson. I saw Bart Miller had a hashtag Suave, so he's doing the old 80s, 90s kid reference to Rico Suave there. Out of Dillard, 3-star prospect, had offers from Miami, Michigan, bunch of Power 5 schools. And my biggest takeaway, man, it feels like I wrote this like a week ago, Joe. It was just a little over 24 hours ago. This is 3 legit Power 5 recruiting wins for Illinois on the offensive line. It's been a while since that has happened. I wrote this stat and I still can't believe it. This O-line class alone, which has 3 commits, has a combined 31 other Power 5 offers on top of Illinois. The 4 previous O-line classes combined at Illinois had 20 other Power 5 scholarship offers among 13 prospects.
Oof. Now, okay, can we add some context as best we can around those numbers, which are pretty striking?
Yes, there's some good prospects who didn't have other Power 5 offers. This isn't to say Rico Jackson is sky ahead of way more prospects, or that, TJ is going to be so far better. TJ McMillan is going to be so much better than Joey Oakley, because I think they're pretty similar prospects. But it's just in terms of winning recruitments, that is striking.
It is, yeah. And you're seeing Bart Miller and Brett Bielema kind of get their swagger a little bit. That's not to indicate they ever lost, but it's starting to really hit overdrive a little bit on the recruiting trail when you can build these relationships. I mean, Jeremy, we talked to Bart, often enough during the season, during spring. You can see where he could build a relationship. You're starting to see them develop these and have a little time to go in there and to win these recruitments. And TJ McMillan was different. He was the guy that they were, quote unquote, I guess, later in the process with them, went in and closed it down later with an offer. I don't know that we should say later in the process in its entirety, later with an offer. There was definitely some conversation there between them. But, you look at the class of 2022 and some talented kids who they closed down early, and they closed down these guys early, but it just, when you're not, the 2022 class was dealing with some COVID ramifications where you couldn't get to camps and couldn't get eyes on you. But yeah, man, 31 Power 5 offers over 3 guys. And again, you close them down at a time that TJ McMillan didn't go looking around and flirting around. And Rico Jackson, I mean, he must have committed like Saturday, because this dude posted at 8 a.m. on Sunday that he was all in.
You're really upset about that, aren't you?
I'm not upset. I was surprised when I woke up, which I would like to just get some credit for waking up before 10 on a Sunday, but that's fine. You're not going to do that. But I just think that, like, it tells you that this wasn't just like a Sunday meeting with Bielema where he was like, oh yeah, okay. I'm like, this was something that happened early in this 48-hour visit.
Yeah, Rico Jackson, 6'6", 300 pounds. That's what a tackle looks like, right? Then you put on the film. I think there's some things he needs to work on. Like, we can get into technical things, but he's a little bit of a waist bender. You want to bend with your legs, your knees. That's what you want to bend with. So they'll have to work with him a little bit on that and mobility. But he's and he also just kind of leans into guys, doesn't use his punch as much, which is really important. You can't just lean on people. You got to be.
Bart Miller is a big fan of like the hand usage placement.
It's a huge part of offensive line play. It's a huge part of defense. It's a huge part of football, right? Is how you use your hands. So he's going to have to learn those things. So it's going to take him some time. But boy, 6'6", 300 pounds, moves extremely well, plays for a really, really good program. There's some things that you really like about him that he's got a high ceiling. So I think it's a big addition to add. You just keep adding talent, keep adding depth. And Joey, it's amazing. They've added 11 scholarship players to the offensive line during their first 18 months here. And that's not even including Jack Badovanak. Like that's the last 2 recruiting classes. So they are making over this room. And, those numbers I was talking about, Power 5 offers, there's more about the last couple of recruiting classes under Lovie Smith. Like Lovie's first couple of recruiting classes, great. That's what got you Alex Palczewski, Vidarian Lowe, Kendrick Green, Julian Pearl, Jordan Slaughter, who's supposed to make an impact. Yeah, Doug Kramer came under Cubitt, but they brought him in. They did a really good job, and then it kind of fell off. Like after Buckus' first 2 classes fell off, both under Buckus and then under Bob McLean. And they only have 4 guys left from that staff on the offensive line. Bielema's already added 11 by 2023. So they're putting their stamp on it. And I think you should be very encouraged by Bielema and Miller, and they get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to offensive line, right? Brett Bielema, based on his time at Wisconsin, Arkansas, gets the benefit of the doubt. And then to win Power 5 battles like you are, I think you got a future identity up there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you can kind of look at how this building has gone also, Jeremy, is the first class had a lot of interior guys. Now you look at a Mountis Moeller, Hunter Whiteneck. Those are guys who you could see as tackle, definitely Mountis, and Hunter could go out there to tackle. But there was a lot of interior guys that they addressed with that first class. Plus the 2 transfers, the JUCO, Zay Adams, Chrysler have guard tackle flexibility. But you're starting to see them kind of beef up that tackle area in this class with Rico Jackson. And if they were to get Brandon Henderson, he would be a guy in that mix, Zachary Amlin. So it doesn't all happen in one class. Over 2 classes, they've addressed every single spot on that line, and they've added flexibility to it and versatility as well, which I continue to beat the drum that's important to them, and it's a big deal.
All right, one more commitment we got to talk about in depth here. Pat Farrell, St. Rita kid. We all expected this to happen, right? But if you're talking about one other position that I think this staff has left their mark on as much as any, running back certainly up there. Jordan Anderson, Aiden Lawfrey, Caden Fagan. They did a good job with the wide receiver class prep-wise last year. But in the last year now, they've added Alec Bryant, Jared Beatty, Gabe Akis, and now Pat Farrell to their outside linebacker crew. I mean, you're basically creating this position from scratch. Now, that's not entirely true because defensive ends can transition to this pretty easily, but you are looking for different bodies. And Pat Farrell's a different body than they've had at defensive end even over the last several years. So 6'5", 235, pretty good athlete. I think he's got a great motor. I do think he's going to have to add strength, but he adds a lot more length on the edge than they've had. Like Owen Carney wasn't the longest guy. Isaiah Gay wasn't the longest guy. You're starting to get Seth Coleman is really long, and you see him when he comes in, start to bat down some passes a little bit more when you got guys who are that long. So I think Farrell can eventually add some more strength, a lot more strength, potentially 30, 40 pounds, and be a guy that's mostly a defensive end. I don't think he's dropping into coverage all that often, but this is a guy that looks like a lot of what the Wisconsin and Iowa guys have looked like. So under recruited maybe a little bit, but I think part of that was most schools knew he was going to Illinois for the last couple of months. Like Purdue and Northwestern showed some interest here, but this is a guy I think get in your program, top 30 prospect, develop in a couple of years. I wouldn't be shocked if he's a starter.
A battle you have to win too. I mean, it's a recruiting battle that you have to win. You have to close down. There was just too much flirting back and forth between the two to not ultimately close that down there. And yeah, I mean, it's and the makeover, not even a makeover, I guess, creation. Boy, did it help a lot, Jeremy, that Isaiah Gay and Owen Carney were able to get off to such a fast start at outside linebackers for their 1 year. But to see how they're doing this, and there's kind of a sneaky amount of depth there for a position that didn't exist 18 months ago in this program. And Pat Farrell adds to that. And again, with this, you can allow him time to put that weight on and put that strength, because you have a guy like an Alec Bryan, a Seth Coleman, and they hope a Jared Beatty and a Gabe Akis. And you can let this, so much of like building longstanding things, this is kind of embodiment, is you got to let the natural development of being in a college program happen without, shoving them out there and saying, good luck. No, it works. Sometimes it works, and it's not a hindrance. You look at Alex Palczewski, Vidarian Lowe, that whole group, but in an ideal world, you would like to slow play it a little bit. And
I don't know. I know they started those games, but I don't know if that's a sell for playing those guys early. They were not good because they weren't ready. Like those guys, most of these freshmen, I think that's where football recruiting is tougher for fans than basketball, right? Basketball is easier. There's less guys. Those guys make immediate impacts usually in basketball, but not all the time, right? But like football, it's you're marinating for 2 years for most of these guys. Now I think Harkless is different, but we talked about the 2022 class. How many of those guys? 4, 5, maybe make a considerable, not even a considerable, but just an impact, right, on this next season. I think it's gonna be the same way in this class, and Farrell would be one of those guys. I think, hey, in 2-3 years, you might need to know his name. He's probably not going to make an impact. And that's a good thing because, I think outside linebacker's got a bright future. I think Coleman can be really good. I think he'd be an NFL player. Alec Bryan, I don't know, but he's certainly talented. I think Beatty and Akis were 2 of the best 3 or 4 gets in the class last year. So adding that talent, and now you add more depth like that, I think it's a good job by Kevin Kane. I think he's just doing a really, really good job in his room.
Yeah, I mean, Sabady and Akis, you took them from Power 5 programs. Tennessee, I think, was pretty knocked back a little bit, the fact that Illinois was able to go in there and close that down on Akis. And even with someone like Farrell, Jeremy, you get the 4 to mess with a little bit, but with a motor like that, as he continues to build, like special teams remains an option for those early years because he plays his butt off and he can do that. Now, I'm not saying it's definitely going to be the case, but there's ways to kind of get these guys who aren't at their ideal weight or frame yet on the field early. And of course, redshirt's the most likely option for almost every freshman to walk the face of the earth because you need it in college football because 22-year-olds are big cats, man, and they're bigger than 18-year-olds. But yeah, man, it's a natural development. It's a big in-state get. Illinois needed to close it down. Like that would have been, if that would have gone south and gone elsewhere, that would have been a tough one to swallow. Similar to a Roderick Pierce, because you were right there for a lot of the way, and it's kind of a tough one to lose if you did, and they did not.
Yeah, I don't think Farrell was ever in doubt. I don't think it was ever
Probably
in doubt.
Not.
Yeah. And it's never a bad thing to get in St. Rita in the Chicago Catholic League. That's a very good program, very good coach. Todd Kuska does a really good job there. And the Chicago Catholic League has been pretty good for Illinois here recently. All right, Joey, let's talk about the guys that are still out there. Let's start with the 2 headliners. We haven't heard from Jair Hill out of Kankakee. He just doesn't say much. But 4-star kid. The fact that he got his first official visit, I think, was big. But obviously, Michigan is in hard with him. Cincinnati, don't overlook Cincinnati with their top 10 recruiting class right now. And Sauce Gardner just went, top 5 in the NFL draft? Like, they got to sell college football playoff, Big 10, Big 12. They're going to be in a couple of years. And Luke Fickell has done an unbelievable job there. So Missouri's involved there, some other programs. I think Michigan's going to be the toughest one to beat. But it was good that you got him here for the official visit. But let's talk a little bit about Malik Elzy. I was able to catch up with him. And this is probably the guy who is most important, I think, optically left in this class. Even though Jair Hill might be a more competitive recruitment, but Malik Elzy has gotten official to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's done a really good job there. But he told me Illinois set a high bar. They set a high standard. There's a 4-star wide receiver out of Chicago, Simeon, the top ranked prospect in Chicago in this recruiting cycle. You did a heck of a job, Joey. I think they got momentum with him right now. I think George McDonald is doing a great job. You have to overcome one, losing. You have to overcome two, your lack of a passing attack. While Cincinnati just had an NFL draft pick quarterback and has some good wide receivers, right? Like, that's where you have to overcome. But it seems like Barry Lundy did a pretty good job of showing him how he could use him in his offense. You wish you had a year of him throwing to Isaiah Williams, in this offense to sell that to somebody like Malik Elzy. But there's urgency here to close this one down. This is I think the big one, along with Jair Hill. Those are the two big ones over the next couple of weeks to see if Illinois can close those down or if they can survive these other official visits. But I think they got a real chance with Malik Elzy. If it's not Illinois with a slight edge, I think it's them in Cincinnati in a toss-up right now.
Yeah, and we say the biggest ones because Illinois is in the ring right now, landing some punches and absorbing some punches with this thing. And look, man, we've said it for, I don't know, Jeremy, how long have we said it? We've wondered, where the wide receiver, what's the long-term outlook there beyond Isaiah Williams? And you've seen them address that in the 2022 class, but man, those guys aren't Malik Elzy. They're not the in-state Chicago kind of flex your muscle a little bit recruit. And that's not to disparage a Sean Miller and Ian Pugh, because Ian Pugh was also an in-state guy that they went up and got. It's not to disparage those. It's just you've been in on Malik for a while and you've done a really good job. And George McDonald made it well known to him that he was a major priority. So, man, it's when you're having these conversations, because they put themselves in a position to be right there at the end, and that's what makes them important.
Yeah, I mean, it's one. I think Illinois has as good a chance as anybody right now in this recruitment. But as we know in recruiting, momentum matters, and you can't let it slip away. So I don't know if it happens now or if he goes as official for Cincinnati, it's all over. Like Cincinnati's going to get. I don't know if that's the case because Aiden Lawfrey went on some other visits, right? And you're thinking, oh, are they going to lose the momentum here? Jared Beatty, same thing, took other visits, took some time. These guys can do that, and why not? This is the one chance they get to check out these schools and make sure that this is where they want to go, so they're not in the transfer portal in a year. So I can't blame Malik Elzy if he wants to take other visits. And he said he will take a trip to Cincinnati here coming up. But I think Illinois did everything they could on this visit. I think they've done everything right in this recruitment. And now it's just, does that resonate more than anyone else? Can their sell match what Cincinnati did? Cincinnati's got a couple wide receivers on board already. And I do think Illinois has done a great job, Joey, of this prospect. I think in-state is appealing to him. I think now in the age of NIL, Illinois can sell that, hey, NIL, there's more possibilities if you're the hometown hero. If you're the Chicago kid, look at Io DeSumo. Like, that's what they've kind of been trying to sell to someone like Caden Fagan, Malik Elzy, Aiden Lawfrey. But I saw Malik play, and he's everything of a 4-star prospect. I know 24/7 Sports has him as the highest 3-star. Again, that's a 4-star prospect for me. 6'3", legit 200 pounds. And I saw him play against Joliet Catholic. He was one of the only kids on Simeon that looked like he belonged on the field. And he made play after play as a receiver. And he showed me a lot when he was a defender. Like, he has physicality to his game, but he's got the mold of what a number 1 Big Ten wideout looks like. So if you can add another top 10, top 5 in-state prospect, that's a headline grabber, right? That's like, hey, Illinois, we're for real in state. Like, you can't just steal in-state prospects as easily from us as you used to. I think it'd be a huge one.
Yeah, I think it's both the headline grabber in the big picture, but also like a consistency grabber. Because I think you kind of put that flag down a little bit last year with Aiden Lawfrey, with Jared Beatty, with Ian Pugh, but to do it 2 years in a row and to continue this, like, it's not like it's just one new coach, hooray, everybody jumps on board and thumbs up. But to do it 2 years in a row and to do it with the Caden Fagan, with the Malik Elzy, now you're you're starting to stack these, and yeah, you're going to lose battles. It's probably going to be the same culprits. A lot of years who get you the Northwesterns, which is still an in-state win for Northwestern, but the Northwesterns, the Wisconsins, that you'll probably lose some to Iowa down the line. Like that's going to happen, but you need to start elbowing some of these other Big Ten schools out of your freaking yard, right? And in the case of Cincinnati, I mean, you want to try to edge out Minnesota as much as you can. You want to try to edge out Cincinnati. You want to really lock it down. And
I think Illinois has bothered Iowa, Minnesota, Cincinnati more than anybody so far.
Yeah, they've definitely,
like Wisconsin. Hey, they still can beat you. Michigan's probably going to beat you. Ohio State, if they want somebody from Chicago, probably going to get them, right? But like, if you can start bothering those other programs who just kind of planted their flag and say, hey, Illinois can't get these kids in state, that's changing. That's changing. And LZ would be another proof of that.
Agreed. And again, a pretty significant position of need, and somebody who I thought his quotes to you, Jeremy, were interesting in the way that Barry Lunny, he pulled up exactly what we thought. Like, hey, you see, look at some of these wide receivers I had at UTSA. Like, I promise you, we're not
at Memorial Stadium putting 37 points on Ryan Walters' defense.
We're not. Yeah, how many times Ryan Walters was like, hey man, I get it. You gotta freaking dial it back.
We got to do that story. We got how much did Ryan hate Barry Lunny after that game?
Well, great. Now, for everyone else who's listening, if you beat us to the story, God bless you. I probably won't.
Competition doesn't listen to this, do they?
Let us know. Like, rate, and review if you do. But I think like that's important. Where like you have to tell kids sometimes. And you'll note, Jeremy, last year, Bielema nudged back a lot on the hey, run game. Like that's kind of as we were starting to get to know him, like he pushed back on that quite a bit. And you're seeing why he did that. And like, you don't want every wide receiver recruit to think like, oh, they're just going to line up in the barge formation. And like, what am I going to do? How is that going to direct path me to the next level? Like, so you're starting to see that narrative continue to get pushed back on. And the best way they can do that, Jeremy, is to have a solid passing attack in 2022 and to have Barry Lunny get that position to take that step. And if you get a buy-in from somebody like Malik Elzy along the way, that's even better news.
Yeah, I think they've actually done pretty good given the lack of passing success of getting the prep wide receivers. At least I think transfers, maybe it's been a bigger issue for them. All right, two guys I would just put in the, hey, they visited. These guys don't say much, but big time recruits. Tight end Deacon Tanielli out of Oswego, top 10 prospect in state. Illinois shooting very high, it seems like, in their tight end pursuits after taking 3 tight ends in the prep class. You got Tip Ryman coming back for 2023, most likely, with Henry Boyer and Owen Anderson and Navion Cargill. And you'd imagine they'll be in the transfer portal, but hey, shoot your shot for Deacon Tanielli. And then Frederick Moore, one of the top prospects out of St. Louis. Really quick, different than LZ. LZ's 6'3", 195, 200. Frederick Moore is more 5'10", quick twitch, returner, slot receiver. Basically, hey, you see your boy Isaiah Williams, what he's doing at Illinois, what he's going to do this year. Frederick, you could be in the same mark. So I think Illinois is battling uphill, probably with the Michigan schools for those guys. Deacon with Michigan, Frederick Moore, Michigan State. But just positive to get those guys on campus. They would have to make a big impression, I think, but hey, they got them on campus, so.
Yeah, it's what we talked about earlier. You get the ones you feel pretty good about on official visits, you shoot your shot, and you hope to do the old catch the fever thing with some of these kids who are going to be long shots. I think you can still say catch the fever in 2022. It's probably not. No one wanted that for a long time. At any rate, like you want to build on that, Jeremy, and maybe it works. It probably, it's going to be an uphill battle. I don't want to say it probably won't, but with tight end specifically, they addressed that long term, I thought, really well in the class of 2022. I wish we had gotten to see more of Owen Anderson in the spring. I know injury limited him, but I think he's got a really appealing skill set, like a Daniel Barker type skill set, go get it, receiver, tight end. But yeah, man, if you don't turn away a top 10 in-state tight end when your whole deal is, hey, we can really produce tight ends. Like, we kind of got a history of doing that. You pitch that You don't turn it away. You try to get it. And it's not that's a position much like a running back would be, where it's not the end of the world if you miss out. You shot your best shot. Now, I think Fagan, that would have been a tough one to miss with everything they had put into that. But I guess we could look at like a Dallin Hayden last year. Like, you shoot your shot, it's not the end of the world if you miss it. And maybe they address it, but portal would make sense too, going into 2023. Yeah, man, I like the way you kind of those two do kind of get categorized together. Quieter guys, probably an uphill battle, but see what you can do if you can get them on campus. You got getting them on campus doesn't hurt, right?
And I always say this: I'll never count out Brett Bielema in a tight end battle, right? Like, I'll do that with running backs, tight ends, maybe edge rushers, and offensive linemen, right? He's got a really good history to sell. And who else does too? Barry Lunny. What they did at Arkansas with Hunter Henry, Jeremy Sprinkle, I think it was, like, they had some guys that came and developed into NFL tight ends. Sabur Kareem, a cornerback out of New Jersey, visited this weekend, the first of many talented DBs. They got a bunch of kids from Florida coming in on the 17th through the 19th who are DBs. So that'll be an important week for Aaron Henry. We'll kind of focus on Aaron Henry that week. But the last one we want to mention here is Brandon Henderson. Like we said before, if there were one offensive lineman I thought would have jumped on board this week, it would have been Brandon Henderson, the East St. Louis kid. But Iowa State's done a really good job there. They were the first Power 5 program to offer. And Matt Campbell, Tom Manning, they're all new O-line coach. Like, I don't know if he's new, but he's been under Tom Manning. Those are 3 offensive line coaches on one staff who've done a pretty dang good job of developing guys and obviously doing a good job with the Iowa State program. That's a head-to-head battle. And I know the question for a lot of fans is, would they take a 4th guy? I don't know if that's answered right now, but I think if Brandon Henderson wants to jump on board, I don't see Brett Bielema and his staff turning him down. He's too talented. He's a top 15 prospect. He's from East St. Louis. They've been recruiting him really, really hard. So maybe something changes along the lines, Joey, but I think they'd take him. I think that the question is, can they win the recruitment? Because Iowa State's done a really good job too.
Yeah, if they can win, I think I'd be hard pressed to say they wouldn't take him. Just, you can look at the history here, right? We thought they were full on wide receivers. Sean Miller was available. You take Sean Miller. We thought they were full on offensive linemen last year. Mountis Muller becomes available. You take Mountis Muller. Then you factor in the fact that you're not having to deal with initials, right? It's just a straight 85. I think that would probably maybe change some calculus, some of the way you go about it. And then you factor in an in-state offensive lineman from a school that you would really, really like to continue to be a part of and to continue to recruit in East St. Louis. Like, all those factors, we haven't gotten an official answer, but as I start to break this down piece by piece, it is hard for me to think that they would say, sorry, man, we're full.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, like, we get our minds out, how many would they take? Are they only taking 3? Like, as you said, those are 2 good examples, Sean Miller, Mountis Muller. I don't think they plan on taking 5 offensive linemen. I know that. I don't think they plan on taking 4 wide receivers, but things change and who you can get matters. And you know what? If you said the scholarship limit's gone now, the initial scholarship for the next 2 classes, you're going to have attrition somewhere, likely on the offensive line with somebody at some point, right? Just add talent, figure it out, figure out the numbers at the end of the day. Right. I would not pass on a guy like Brandon Henderson. I don't see Illinois doing it either, but now it's about winning the recruitment. And Iowa State, I think we have a lot of respect for Matt Campbell, Nathan Schloss, Tom Manning, all those guys do a really good job. So going to be an interesting battle down the stretch. So next up, Joey, we got the camp circuit. Illinois is having 2 camps before their next official visit weekend. No officials next weekend. They got a camp on Saturday. They got a camp next Thursday on the 16th. They're also going to be across the country going to all these mega camps. So this is a time that'll be interesting. Do they push to close? Are they able to close on some of these guys who just visited? Also, are there any new offers that come about? Whether that's this class, future classes, it's a big evaluation time for the staff.
It is. And you probably will see some offers. Coming out of you'd kind of be surprised if they traveled to all these camps and walked away without new offers. So it's about, again, it goes back to the way we talked about the quarterback is, where are they offering? Who are they offering? What's type? I mean, now it's kind of it's April or it's January again, right? You go back in there and you take notes of kind of how they're going about things, and then they'll pick up again. That's the Florida weekend. I know it's not exclusively Florida, the 17th. Can we call it the Florida weekend? That's a chance for Aaron Henry to flex his muscles a little bit. And I think, Jeremy, Mason Murgan is kind of a big one that weekend, a chance to get in there. You getting him an official, you could really put another dent in your defensive line recruiting class there as well.
Yeah, I kind of want to end this, Joe, with kind of looking at what are the top needs still in this class. And despite the headliner of this weekend, I think defensive line remains a top need. Is it number one now? I'm not sure. Do you move wide receiver above it? Do you move DB above it? DB, you need quantity. That is for sure. But I still think you need more help on the future of the defensive line. And you mentioned Mason Murgan. Ian Jeffries is an interesting one that they just offered out of Mississippi. So those are the two guys I would look at for that. I think wide receivers are really big need. Malik Elzy is number one, obviously, on that board. Frederick Moore, I think you saw the two priorities on campus. Colin Dixon, will he make it to campus on the 17th? Will be interesting because he's visiting Wisconsin the week before. He rescheduled his visit from Illinois from the 3rd to the 17th. You wonder if that's the Roderick Pierce thing, basically saying, I'm going to see if I can lock up my spot at Wisconsin first. And then they got Terraman Lott out of Florida, a speedster they offered, who could be the slot. Maybe if they don't close on Frederick Moore, maybe that's a guy they want to add. But DB is a very big need in this class because what they're losing, Sidney Brown, Quan Martin, Kendall Smith, Terrell Jennings potentially could have 2 years of eligibility, but I think at this point, just one. And then Devin Witherspoon, is he an NFL guy? This is his 4th year of college football, believe it or not. So they have a lot to replace and a lot of numbers that they need. And you got guys like Jaheim Clark, Zachary Tobe coming in for visits, Jason Ducona, his brother just committed to Cincinnati, Jonas. So they got some big visits coming up on that side of the ball. And I think we just have faith that Aaron Henry is going to get some Florida DBs. Don't know who they'll be, but he's going to get some Florida DBs who are long and athletic.
And Henry and Ryan Walters. Yeah. I think that is two guys who are plugged in the state of Florida, who are pretty highly thought of. One in the profession, two as recruiters. Like I think you can look at that weekend. I need to look and think more before I put a number, but you could see someone popping out of that weekend or quickly after that weekend. And we've seen, speak of DBs, I really wish we could have seen Elijah McCantos, Jeremy, in the spring. I think they're high. I think they're high on him. Obviously, they brought him in. He was a big win for them. But you want to see what else they can do in that weekend there. It's a big opportunity you'd feel pretty good if you can get someone to pop out of there and kind of take a breath as you go into that last weekend of June into July and see what goes on from there.
Can I give one more need before we get out of here?
Oh,
don't overlook the specialists, man. Can we talk about specialist recruiting? Because David Alano, the kicker out of Naperville North,
he seems like he is very interested in Illinois, right?
Yes. Now, will Illinois offer a scholarship or is it a preferred walk-on thing to get a scholarship? It seems like Brett Bielema does the latter more often. A lot of Power 5 schools do that. Declan Dooley, kid out of El Paso Gridley, just got his first Division I offer from Troy. Now, these usually don't really heat up until teams know their scholarship situations towards the end of these recruiting, but those are two in-state kids who are pretty good. That is a need. Specialists are a big question mark coming into 2022 season, right? And we talk about close games. We expect Illinois to be in close games. Caleb Griffin's waiting his turn, but he's pretty unproven. Hugh Robertson has punted once in a real American football game. There's some unknowns there, both short-term and the long-term.
Yeah, dude, it has been so long since we've had to talk about specialists on the field. We talked about specialist recruiting, but really talked about specialist recruiting. I don't want to say you're going to miss James McCourt and Blake Hayes in the sense of sounding the alarms at who's in the room. I don't think that's fair, but you are going to miss those guys, the consistency, the provenness, just everything that they were and the way that Brett Bielema was able to game plan around them and deploy them. It's a good call, man. This is kind of I've not been this is my 5th year on the beat. So again, I've not really seen specialist recruiting have to be a thing. But when does that pick up, Jeremy? Let me interview you. When does when does that line up?
Well, Caleb Griffin was a February decision. Blake Hayes got on
Basketball season. Yeah.
Blake Hayes was a surprise addition on campus. I think I interviewed him when he was already a student here, so I didn't get in trouble by the SIDs, but I thought he was in Australia. And I called him. It was June, and he's like, "Oh, I'm on campus." I'm like, "Oh, well, let's just continue the interview." But yeah, it's some of these guys are really late. Hugh Robertson, I believe, was really, really late. August guy. So it depends on whether you want, if Illinois offered one of those guys, I'm sure they'd commit, but do you invest a scholarship in a guy that are you sure he's going to be your starter? Like, cause if you have a scholarship backup, that's a valuable scholarship, right? That could be making an impact elsewhere. When you could get a preferred walk-on who's very similar, hungry for a scholarship offer, Bielema seems to make those guys work for it, right? So that'll be interesting to watch moving forward.
That's a really good point. I haven't thought about that. And two in-state guys who are really highly thought of too, and David Alano and Declan Dooley. It's going to be interesting. That's like the low key right. Interesting thing down the stretch here.
Deep cut. Oh yeah, when we get to like January, we're just diving deep into specialist recruiting. Can they beat out the the MAC offer, the scholarship offer with preferred walk-on spot? Can't wait for that discussion. All right. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. That's an hour of Illinois football recruiting. There's a lot to talk about. And I felt like you and I probably could have gone even more into this, but as more come in, more commitments, more weekends come up, we will break down even more on the Illini Inquirer podcast. Any last thoughts here, Joey, before we get out of here?
Just wonder, will there be one before the next recruiting weekend, the OB weekend? Will there be someone to pop? And if it is, the way this is kind of trickled here, Jeremy, I think if it does happen to be a big pop, because that would mean that there's not a lot of others. Yeah, that makes like sitting out there. There'd be some recruiting wins out there to be had. Can they close? That's a big one for the next few weeks.
Well, Illinois came into the week, I think, ranked 50 something in overall team ranking, 13th in the Big Ten rankings. As of taping this podcast on, Monday afternoon. It was a crazy weekend, Joey. 8 commits, now ranks 9th in the Big Ten, the composite, and 33rd in the country.
I will be traveling the state of Alabama to see if Nick Saban has anything to say Brett Bielema and recruiting, because I think they're ahead of Alabama as we record this, and it doesn't look. I don't want anyone to think I think that.
There must have been a rankings adjustment because Bama is 1 spot ahead. So
I've seen it coming.
So if you have the screenshot, you might want to sell it as an NFT. Are those things so valuable? I never understood.
My mind went to like frame it. I guess. Do you think people even have picture frames soon? Will picture frames be a thing of the past? All NFT and. My
mother-in-law will own all the picture frames because her house is full of them. But Illinois is above Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Rutgers, Iowa State. So that's not a bad place to be. Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz and all he's doing. They're ahead of Missouri right now. So some good ones.
We just really quickly, because I'm looking at this. I'm sorry. I know we've been talking for an hour. I'm always fascinated, Jeremy, by like the player hosts. And it seems like the player hosts this weekend, really delivered. Like, it's probably not the most important thing to talk about, but the law firm really swarmed of Keith Randolph and Johnny Newton. They really swarmed Jamarian Harkless. You saw Cal Swanson with Bryce Barnes and Art Sikowski. That's just something I'm interested in moving forward as Bielema starts to get more of himself, the familiarity established, who you can kind of deploy on these things. And then his guys, like Joey Okla in 2 years is probably going to be a player host for somebody. Let's just put that on the table right now. Like, it's just interesting to me.
Yeah. Talking with these guys, as much as the coaches, the recruits they're around, the commits they're around. I think Caden Fagan helped with Harkless as well. And some of these other guys, TJ McMillan, Cal Swanson brought up as just being an awesome guy. And then with Malik Elzy, he talked a lot about Casey Washington, guy who transferred away from the program when Brett Bielema got here, came back and has loved it. And I think that's really resonated with him. And then Isaiah Williams, a guy who I think most wide receivers are starting to know as a potential NFL guy. He was a host for Malik Elzy. So yeah, all of that's really important. And they seem, we don't know if it all adds closing, but I think they strike the right notes on these official visits. I think landing 4 of them within 24 hours of this all ending is proof of that. And now we'll see if they can add any more headliners out of this weekend. For Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Warner. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. We are loaded at IlliniInquirer.com with all the latest in Illinois football recruiting. Talk with Derek Piper today. He's got a lot of basketball stuff still in the works as well. He's going to look at some of the big questions about this retooled Illinois roster, because there's reasons to be excited, but there's some questions about them. So he'll have more on that, the latest on recruiting as well. And you can check it all out at IlliniInquirer.com. So everybody take care of each other. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.